By the time the sky turned red, our city had already said goodbye to itself. I know that sounds dramatic, but I was there, standing beneath the Western Shield Tower with 3,000 civilians packed into the transit plaza behind me, watching the defense barrier flicker like a tired porch light in a storm. My name is Vale Ira Knox, Civilian Defense Officer of Cairn Colony, and until that morning my job was mostly paperwork, evacuation drills, and telling frightened merchants that no, the emergency sirens were not optional background music. Then the enemy fleet arrived over our clouds, and suddenly every boring drill I had ever hated became the only thing keeping people from running in circles. The city's shield above us was built to stop debris, pirates, and the occasional meteor fragment, not a full orbital siege line. Everyone knew it. The engineers knew it. The council knew it. Even the children knew it because children are very good at hearing the truths adults try to whisper quietly. The barrier glowed pale gold across the skyline, beautiful in the worst possible way, each impact from above spreading ripples of light over the towers. Every ripple was larger than the last. Every pause between them became shorter. Our command center projected the shield's status on every public screen because apparently panic was more efficient when everyone could watch the numbers fall together. 41%, 38, 32, people stopped asking when help would come around the time it dropped below 30. That was when the silence began, not total silence, of course. A city does not truly go quiet when it is afraid. Babies cry, air filters hum, old pipes knock. Someone always drops something metal at the worst possible moment. But the voices changed. They smaller, closer. Families spoke forehead to forehead. Friends held hands and pretended they were not counting the seconds between impacts. I walked the line in my blue-gray emergency uniform, telling everyone to stay low, conserve water, keep identification bands visible, and breathe slowly. Professional things, useless things. The kind of things you say when the truth is too large to fit in your mouth. Above the plaza, the enemy broadcast repeated through every hack speaker in the city. Surrender remains available. Resistance is inefficient. Civilian compliance will be rewarded. They said it with the soft, mechanical patience of beings who had already decided the ending. I hated them for that more than the weapons. The certainty, the boredom. To them, we were not a city, we were a scheduling problem. I looked toward the eastern towers, where the shield had begun to thin enough that we could see the shapes of ships hanging beyond the clouds, dark and patient. No rescue fleet was coming from the core worlds. No military alliance was breaking formation to save one border colony. Our nearest defense cruiser had gone silent 20 minutes earlier. The council chamber had stopped responding. My own wrist display showed 12 unanswered distress confirmations, all marked pending, delayed, redirected, or unavailable. Then the shield dropped to 19% and the plaza screens switched automatically from defense status to final shelter protocol. That was when the crowd understood, not guessed, understood. We were no longer waiting to be saved. We were waiting to find out how much time remained. I looked up at that failing gold shield, at the red clouds boiling beyond it, and I did what every officer is trained not to do. I braced for the end. Then my wrist display chirped once. One incoming message. Terran origin, 2 words, hold position. For one full second, I thought the message was a system error because Hope has a cruel sense of humor when it arrives too late. Terran origin, hold position, that was all. No fleet signature, no rescue estimate, no tactical map. Just 2 words from a species most of the core world still described as young, emotional, and dangerously informal. I stared at the message until the letters blurred against the cracked glow of my wrist display. Earth had answered. Earth. The little blue-white world that most strategic councils treated like a noisy frontier cousin with good intentions and questionable table manners. They were not one of the old powers. They did not command ancient dreadnought lines or thousand-year alliances. Their ambassadors smiled too much. Their engineers modified equipment without asking permission, and their clear-throat soldiers used phrases like "we have got this" in situations where everyone else preferred actual plans. I had met exactly 3 humans before the siege. One was a cargo pilot who apologized to a door after walking into it. One was a medical volunteer who cried over a lost animal and then worked 30 hours without stopping. The third had taught colony children a game involving a ball, running, and rules that changed whenever the children started losing. Friendly, yes. Brave, maybe. Galactic rescue material. No one serious would have said that out L. Ood behind me, Counselor Drem saw my expression and hurried over, his ceremonial robes gathered in both hands. Officer Knox, what is it? I showed him the message. For a moment his eyes brightened. Then he saw the sender. The brightness faded politely, which was worse than fear. Terrans, he said. They responded, yes. With what force? I checked the tactical feed again. Nothing. Empty upper atmosphere. Enemy ships in fixed positions. Local defense grid failing. No allied transponder within range. Unknown, I said. Drem's voice swallowed. Perhaps it is an automated acknowledgement. Perhaps, I said, because leadership sometimes requires lying in a steady voice. The shield dropped to 17%. Another ripple rolled across the sky and dust rained from the plaza ceiling vents. The civilians flinched together. I ordered the southern shelter doors opened, then closed them again when the corridor beyond registered structural strain. Every option on my board was turning yellow, then orange, then red. We had sent distress calls to the Valorian Compact, the Thrax Guard, the Merchant Defense Union, even the academic patrol ships that claimed neutrality until someone scratched their research vessels. Their replies had been elegant, regretful, and useless. Rerouting, assessing, unable to intervene, monitoring the situation. Earth was the only one that had not given us a paragraph. Earth had given us an order. Hold. I hated that it worked on me. My hands stopped shaking. Not because I believed rescue was coming, I did not. The math was still impossible. Earth's nearest rapid response station was more than 7 light hours away by standard route, and the enemy had jammed the lanes. Even if they had launched the moment our distress beacon fired, they should have been nowhere near Cairn Colony. But the words were so calm, so absolute. Like whoever sent them had looked at the same impossible math and decided the math could wait its turn. The enemy broadcast changed tone above us. Local command, your defensive barrier is below sustainable threshold. Final compliance window begins now. A countdown appeared on the public screens, 5 minutes, large white numbers over a city holding its breath. Drem looked at me. Officer, we should prepare the surrender channel. I looked at the Terran message again. Hold position, 2 words. No explanation, no comfort, no promise, just a line in the dark from a species too stubborn to write condolences. I closed my fist over the display and turned toward the plaza speakers. Citizens of Cairn, I said, voice echoing across the shelter level, remain in position, keep low, keep calm, help is responding. The lie tasted like metal. But then, far above the weakening shield, something moved in the red clouds. The movement in the clouds lasted less than a second, and then the enemy stole our attention back with perfect timing. All public screens cut to black. The countdown remained in the corner, but the center filled with the face of their fleet commander, or at least the polished mask he used as a face. Smooth silver armor, crowned command crest, eyes like cold green glass. I had seen his kind in military briefings. The Varkish Dominion, a civilization that treated mercy like a clerical error. His voice rolled through the plaza speakers with calm theater, the way villains speak when they believe history is already taking notes. Citizens of Cairn Colony, your shield integrity is now below 15%. Continued resistance will result in total administrative correction. That was the phrase they used, not destruction, not conquest, administrative correction, as if our homes were a typo on a form. Around me, the crowd tightened together. A mother covered her child's ears, which was kind but pointless, because the words were also appearing in bright white text across every wall display. Counselor Drem stepped beside me, pale and shaking now without pretending otherwise. We need to open a channel, he said. If we wait until the shield fails, they may not accept terms. I wanted to argue. I wanted to point at the sky and say Earth had answered, that something had moved above the clouds, that maybe 2 impossible words meant more than 100 elegant excuses from stronger empires. But command training is very good at beating fantasy out of you. The tactical map still showed no allied fleet, no local air support, no rescue corridor, just enemy vessels arranged above us like patient knives, each one holding position outside the weakening shield. 4 minutes 30 seconds. The commander continued, local leaders will transmit surrender codes, defense personnel will power down remaining grid functions, civilians will remain in marked assembly zones for processing. Compliance will preserve essential population assets, essential population assets. I heard a sound from the crowd then, soft and broken, not loud enough to be panic, too human to be silence, even though none of us were human. That was the moment I understood what terror really does. It does not always make people run. Sometimes it makes them stand very still while terrible language tries to turn them into inventory. Drem opened the surrender authorization on his tablet. His hands moved through the first security layer, then the second. The plaza watched him because surrender, at least, was something to watch, something official, something with steps. My wrist display buzzed again, and my heart betrayed me by leaping. But it was not Earth this time. It was local defense telemetry, shield at 12%, outer districts losing coverage, northern tower overheating. Western relay unstable, 3 minutes 50 seconds. I looked up again. The red clouds churned beyond the barrier. The movement I had seen was gone, swallowed by smoke and light. Maybe it had been debris. Maybe a piece of our own defense grid burning up. Maybe hope wearing someone else's coat. The enemy commander tilted his head as if listening to some private report, then smiled without warmth. We are receiving no surrender transmission, he said. That is unfortunate. Demonstration sequence authorized. The sky flashed white above the eastern ridge. The shield absorbed it barely, and every light in the plaza flickered. People screamed this time, not for long, just enough to remind the city it still had voices. The shield's status dropped from 12 to 8 in one sickening jump. Drem looked at me with wet eyes. Officer Knox, please. I did not have the rank to stop him. I did not have the fleet to save anyone. I did not even have a good lie left, so I did the smallest useless thing imaginable. I stepped between him and the public camera and raised my hand for 10 more seconds. 10, Drem whispered. You are bargaining with seconds. Yes, I said, because seconds were all Earth had asked me to hold. The countdown hit 3 minutes, then 2 minutes 59, then every radar alarm in the city screamed at once. Every radar alarm in Cairn Colony screamed at once, and for half a breath I thought the shield had finally failed. That was the only explanation my mind could reach quickly enough. Too many contacts, too fast, too high. The tactical screen above the plaza exploded into red markers. Hundreds of them appearing over the northern hemisphere like someone had thrown glowing sand across the map. The crowd saw the display and reacted exactly the wrong way, which is to say exactly like civilians watching the sky fill with unidentified objects during an orbital siege. They surged backward. I shouted for everyone to stay down. My voice vanished under the alarms. Counselor Drem dropped his surrender tablet. It hit the floor and slid beneath the bench, which would have been funny on a day when the sky was not actively rewriting our understanding of panic. The enemy broadcast stuttered. For the first time since it began, the Varkish commander stopped speaking. His perfect mask tilted upward. He was seeing it too. Incoming atmospheric entries, the defense computer announced in its pleasant emergency voice. Quantity unknown, velocity extreme, classification pending. Pending was a generous word. The objects were not moving like missiles. They were not shaped like debris. They were not following any sane descent curve used by civilized landing craft. They came straight down through the upper atmosphere in narrow white streaks, burning hot enough to punch lines through the red cloud cover. The first wave looked like falling stars. The second looked like a meteor shower that had developed military discipline. The third made every automated system in the city give up and labeled the contacts as impossible. Drem looked at me from the floor, one hand still reaching for the surrender tablet. What are they? I checked the signal filters, hands moving before hope could make them clumsy. No Dominion tags, no Core Alliance codes, no merchant emergency beacons. Then one of the falling objects pulsed a tight, encrypted burst through the jamming field. My wrist display caught 2 words and 1 symbol, Terran drop. I forgot how to breathe. Above us, the enemy fleet reacted late because arrogance slows even machines. Their upper batteries turned toward the incoming objects. Targeting beams searched through the clouds. The shield over the city flickered at 6%, too weak to help, too stubborn to vanish. The first object hit atmosphere hard enough to rattle every loose panel in the shelter plaza, then unfolded wings of blue-white breaking fire. Not wings, I realized. Stabilizers, controlled descent, a pod, another opened behind it, then another, then 50. Then so many that counting became ridiculous. They were not debris, they were not weapons, they were delivery systems, and whatever they were delivering had chosen the most unreasonable entrance in recorded colonial history. The public screens, still hijacked by the Dominion, suddenly filled with static. A human voice cut through it, low, calm, and annoyed in a way that felt almost persona. El Kiern Defense, this is Lieutenant Nathan Cole, Terran Rapid Response 1st Skyfall Unit. Mark civilian zones with blue beacon and keep your heads down, we are inbound. There was a pause, a burst of interference, and then the same voice returned, clearer this time. Also, tell your council not to surrender. We hate paperwork. For 1 perfect second, nobody in the plaza moved. Then the clouds above the city tore open with firelight and the first human drop pod came through. The first pod did not land so much as argue with gravity and win by being louder. It came through the failing shield in a cone of blue breaking fire, spinning once, correcting itself, then slamming into the avenue outside the transit plaza with enough force to shake dust from every ceiling beam. The pod doors blew outward in clean segments before the smoke had even cleared, and a human soldier stepped out like he was arriving late to a meeting. White skin visible beneath the rim of his helmet. Dark tactical armor marked with a small Terran flag on one shoulder. Rifle lowered, not waving wildly, not shaking, not searching for courage. He moved with the terrible calm of someone who had already done the frightening part on the way down. More pods struck across the district in perfect spacing, 1 on the medical roof, 2 beside the western relay, 4 near the broken tram line. Each opened and humans came out running, not scattered, not confused, coordinated. Their boots hit our streets and the entire rhythm of the siege changed. Until then, everything had moved at Dominion speed, slow pressure from above, a countdown, a city being squeezed into surrender. The humans brought a different tempo, fast, sharp, almost rude. Lieutenant Nathan Cole's voice came through every working emergency channel at once. Blue beacons up, civilian lanes first, engineers to Shield Tower 3. Fire teams, eyes high, nobody crowds the exits, nobody plays hero. We are guests here, so do not break anything we cannot fix. I looked toward the plaza beacon control and realized I was still holding my hand in the air like an idiot bargaining with seconds that had already been paid for. I dropped it and slammed the blue beacon command. Across the shelter district, bright columns of light rose from civilian zones. The humans adjusted immediately. Two squads formed along the plaza entrances. Another group moved toward the shield tower with compact repair cases that looked too small to matter and somehow did. A medic with a red cross painted over alien script knelt beside a frightened child and offered a foil blanket like the world was not ending above him. That was what broke my understanding first. Not their entrance, not their armor, their priorities. They had fallen from orbit into an active siege and their first instinct was traffic control. The Dominion recovered enough to broadcast again, but their voice had lost its theater. Unidentified Terran units, you are interfering in a lawful correction action. Withdraw or be removed. Nathan Cole's reply came after half a second. Negative. The words sounded bored. Then he added, Kieran Colony requested assistance. Assistance has arrived. Counselor Drem, still on the floor beside his lost surrender tablet, stared at the nearest human through the plaza glass. They came, he whispered. I almost corrected him. Almost said a few squads were not enough, that the Dominion fleet still owned the sky, that our shield sat at 6% and falling, that brave soldiers could not change orbital math. Then one of the human engineers reached the base of the western tower, plugged a Terran device into our old defense grid, and the shield status stopped falling. It did not rise, not yet, but it stopped, 6% holding. The entire plaza saw it, 6% holding. A sound moved through the civilians. Not a cheer, not yet, something smaller and more dangerous to despair, belief trying to stand up. Outside, Nathan Cole crossed the avenue through smoke and falling dust, visor lifted just enough for us to see his face. He was younger than I expected, older than fear, and absurdly calm for a man who had entered our atmosphere like a thrown stone. He looked up at the enemy ships waiting beyond the clouds, then down at the city map projected from his wrist. Officer Knox, he said over the channel, I need your evacuation routes, your weak points, and the most stubborn local who knows this district. I opened the reply with hands that no longer shook. That would be me. Good, he said. Stay on this line. We are going to make the countdown embarrassing. The Dominion made the same mistake every empire makes when a smaller species arrives too. Calmly, they assumed the humans were desperate. Their fleet commander appeared again on the hijack screens, but now his polished mask looked slightly less polished, and that gave me more comfort than it should have. Terran infantry deployment acknowledged, he said. Tactical assessment, symbolic intervention with Rawl recommended, symbolic. That was the word he chose, while human engineers were crawling through our shield grid like they had owned it for years, while human medics moved civilians away from glass corridors, while human soldiers turned our broken avenues into organized lanes with colored lights, hand signals, and the kind of language that sounded informal until you realized everyone obeyed it instantly. Nathan Cole did not even look up at the broadcast. He stood in the middle of East Meridian Avenue with a holographic map floating above his wrist, listening to 3 channels at once. Officer Knox confirmed tram tunnel access under Sector Blue 4. Confirmed, I said. It runs beneath the plaza, but the east gate is blocked. Not for long, he replied. Martinez, bring the cutter. Singh, mark that route civilian only. Dawes, if anyone with a camera gets in your lane, smile and move them behind cover. We are representing Earth. A human voice answered, copy that, boss, friendly and bored. I had never heard soldiers sound like that while enemy ships waited above them. Not careless. That is important. They were not careless at all. They checked corners, counted civilians, logged structural damage, tagged unstable walls, and corrected each other with tiny gestures before mistakes became visible. But their fear, if they had any, had been folded so tightly inside discipline that the rest of us could not see it. The Dominion saw the same thing and misunderstood it completely. Ground units, the commander announced, you are outnumbered and unsupported. Nathan finally looked up, not at the screen, but at the sky behind it. Then he smiled. Unsupported, he said softly over our channel. That one got a few human laughs. I did not understand why. I would soon. First, though, he made the enemy look foolish in smaller ways. The Dominion tried to jam our blue beacons. Terran signal boosters snapped online from 3 rooftops, and the beacons burned brighter. The Dominion tried to trigger panic by cutting the shelter lights. Human portable lamps unfolded along the plaza walls in neat white rows, warmer than our own emergency lighting and somehow more reassuring. The Dominion broadcast a warning about Terran casualties. Nathan patched over it with calm evacuation instructions and a reminder to drink water if able. It was not heroic in the old songs. It was worse for the enemy. Competent, relentlessly competent, a Dominion scout craft dipped below the cloud layer, probably to intimidate the plaza. Before anyone could scream, human targeting lights painted it from 6 angles. No dramatic announcement, no wild motion, just 6 red dots appearing on its hull at once. The craft climbed back into the clouds so quickly it looked embarrassed. The civilians saw that, so did the Dominion, so did I. Nathan turned to the nearest squad. Nobody chases, hold the line, their job is to make us look up while the city panics. Our job is the city, that sentence lodged in me. Our job is the city, not glory, not revenge, not proving humanity deserved a seat at some galactic table. The city, the people, the route under the tram station, the old woman who could not walk fast. The child who had lost his identification band, the shield tower overheating behind the market dome. Humans had fallen out of the sky and immediately started caring about details. That more than their entrance frightened the Dominion, because desperate soldiers rush, humans organized. By the time the enemy countdown reached 1 minute, the plaza had changed shape. Civilians were moving through marked lanes, injured people were wrapped and carried, engineers had stabilized 2 shield relays. The surrender tablet still lay under the bench, forgotten. Counselor Dram looked at it, then at the humans, then quietly stepped away from it. The Dominion commander noticed. His voice sharpened, final warning. Terran units will be treated as hostile combatants. Nathan Cole glanced at the timer, then at my city map. Good, he said, they are finally catching up. At 52 seconds on the Dominion countdown, Nathan Cole finally told me the truth, and he did it with the casual cruelty of someone who had been letting the enemy embarrass itself on purpose. Officer Knox, he said over the channel, I need you to open civilian access to the old weather tower roof. The weather tower? I looked at the city map, certain I had misheard. That structure has not been used in 12 years. Perfect. It still has a clear sky view, yes, but the elevators are unreliable and the roof beacon array is obsolete. Ma'am, we did not come here for the elevator. Before I could ask what that meant, 3 human soldiers moved toward the tower stairwell at a jog, carrying a case the size of a travel trunk between them. They passed a group of fighting civilians, slowed just long enough to guide them toward the tram tunnel, then kept moving. Not rushed, not frantic, efficient. The Dominion countdown hit 45 seconds, above the clouds there. Ships shifted formation. The enemy believed the first human drop had been a symbolic rescue attempt, maybe an emotional gesture from a species famous for turning bad odds into worse plans. They believed those first soldiers were all Earth had managed to throw at the problem. I believed it too, because believing anything else felt greedy. Nathan stood beside the plaza beacon, looking up through the weakening shield. His visor reflected the red sky. Lieutenant, I said, if you have another plan, now would be a wonderful time. He smiled without taking his eyes off the clouds. The first drop is never the plan, it is the doorbell. I had no response to that because civilized militaries do not ring doorbells by jumping from orbit during a siege. The weather tower roof lit blue. The 3 soldiers had reached the top and opened their case. A narrow beam speared up through the clouds, not bright to the eye, but every sensor in the city noticed. My tactical display filled with Terran encryption faster than it could translate. Signal lock established. Beacon acknowledged. Drop corridor confirmed. The Dominion commander stopped his countdown at 39 seconds. He did not mean to. The screen simply froze on his face, and for the first time his silence belonged to him. Then the sky answered. Not with 1 pod, not with 50, with layers. The clouds above Cairn Colony split along 100 burning lines, and the upper atmosphere filled with controlled fire. New contacts appeared beyond the first wave, farther out, higher up, falling in disciplined arcs that surrounded the city like a closing shield made of humans. The plaza screens tried to count them and failed. The defense computer upgraded quantity unknown to quantity excessive, which was the most honest thing any machine said that day. Nathan spoke into the command channel. Skyfall 2, civilian districts marked blue. Skyfall 3, shield relay support. Skyfall 4, secure north approach. Fleet marker is active. Keep the lanes clean. No grand speech. No battle cry. Just tasks falling into place as naturally as rain. The Dominion fleet reacted with sudden movement, but sudden is not the same as ready. They had aimed at a dying shield and a frightened city. They had not aimed at the sky itself, becoming crowded with Terrans. A deep vibration rolled through the plaza, not from impact this time, but from something beyond the clouds. The jamming field flickered. Stars appeared where the red static had been. Then a shape emerged high above the eastern horizon, vast and dark against the burning atmosphere. A Terran cruiser slid into view behind the interference like it had been standing there the whole time, waiting for the enemy to look in the wrong direction. Then another. Then 3 smaller ships. Then a carrier with its whole lights blinking in calm formation. Counselor Drem whispered something that sounded like a prayer, forgetting its own words. The Dominion commander returned to the screens, but the mask of certainty was gone. Terran fleet elements, he said, voice tight. This escalation is unlawful. Nathan looked almost offended. You attacked a colony under distress protection and jammed rescue lanes, he replied. We filed the complaint on the way down. There was a pause. Then he added, our legal team is worse than our infantry. The humans around him laughed once and kept working. That was when I realized the first soldiers had not come to win the battle by themselves. They had come to keep us alive long enough for the sky to open properly. They were not the rescue. They were the promise that rescue was already moving. The battle changed in 3 minutes, which is a ridiculous thing to say unless you were standing in Cairn Colony watching humans treat an invasion like a scheduling conflict. At the start of those 3 minutes, the Dominion owned the sky. Our shield was barely holding, and my city was measuring survival in heartbeats. By the end, the enemy fleet was backing away from the lower atmosphere. Our evacuation lanes were moving faster than our drills had ever managed, and Lieutenant Nathan Cole was arguing with an engineer about whether a shield tower could be repaired with Terran parts, local wiring, and what he called enough stubbornness. The second and third waves came down cleaner than the first, pods landing on rooftops, avenues, transit hubs, and defense platforms with a precision that made our own emergency maps look embarrassed. Human squads spread through the city in quiet bursts of motion. Some secured intersections. Some carried portable shield emitters to shelter doors. Some climbed relay towers that local technicians had declared unreachable 10 minutes earlier. None of them moved like heroes in propaganda. They moved like workers who had arrived at a job site and found the previous contractor had made a mess. That was somehow more impressive. Nathan kept me on the command link, asking questions so specific they rewired my opinion of military competence. Which underpass floods first in heavy rain? Which hospital has the weakest backup power? Which district has the most elderly residents? Which market stalls store fuel cells? Which streets look clear on maps but are always blocked by delivery carts? The Dominion had studied our defenses. The humans studied our habits. That was the difference. Above the city, the Terran ships did not rush into some glorious display. They positioned themselves between the Dominion and the civilian zones, forcing the enemy to choose between retreating or escalating in front of recorded distress monitors, Terran legal beacons, and half the quadrant's emergency relay network, which the humans had somehow switched back on while falling from the sky. The Dominion tried to push drones through the Western Gap. Human countermeasures turned them blind and guided them into empty lots where they settled uselessly into the dust like confused insects. The Dominion tried to jam our evacuation bands. Terran signal teams bounced our local channels through weather satellites, museum repeaters, and one children's educational broadcast tower that had not been maintained since my grandmother was young. For 30 seconds, all emergency instructions were transmitted with cheerful background music from an old alphabet program. No one complained. It worked. The shield rose from 6% to 9, then 12, then 18. Each percentage point felt impossible. People in the plaza began moving with purpose instead of fear, following blue lights into the tram tunnel, carrying bags, holding children, helping strangers. Clear's throat Counselor Dram found his surrender tablet under the bench, looked at it for a long moment and placed it carefully in a trash receptacle. I respected him more for that than for any speech he had ever given. The Dominion commander appeared once more, but now his broadcast fought through static and human overlays. This intervention will be remembered, he warned. Nathan looked at the screen while tightening a strap on his armor. Good, he said. Remember accurately. Then he turned away before the commander could answer. That was when I understood the thing that made humans dangerous. It was not that they were fearless. I saw fear in them in quick glances, clipped breaths, hands checking gear twice. They were afraid. They simply did useful things anyway. They did not waste terror. They spent it like fuel. In 3 minutes, they gave our city back its exits, its shield, its communications, and the one thing the Dominion had worked hardest to remove, the belief that tomorrow still had room for us in it. When the enemy ships began rising through the red clouds, not rooted, not destroyed, but forced away from the people they had expected to process like inventory, the plaza finally cheered. Nathan winced at the volume, then glanced toward me through the command feed. Officer Knox, he said, your civilians are loud. I looked at the blue evacuation lights, the holding shield, the Terran pods cooling in our streets, and the sky no longer belonging entirely to the enemy. Yes, Lieutenant, I said, they are alive. After the Dominion ships withdrew beyond the red clouds, nobody in Cairn Colony knew what to do with the silence. For hours, we had lived under alarms, countdowns, impacts against the shield, and the voice of an enemy who sounded certain that our fear belonged to him. Then the sky cleared just enough to show Terran ships holding station above us, dark shapes against a wounded sunset, and the city became quiet in a way that felt almost fragile, not safe. Not yet. Safety is not a switch someone flips after terror. It is a thing people approach slowly like a frightened animal. The evacuation lanes kept moving. The shield kept climbing. Human engineers kept arguing cheerfully with our local systems, calling them stubborn, dramatic, and beautiful in this. Human medics kept handing out water, blankets, and calm instructions. Human soldiers stood at intersections with their helmets pushed back, faces tired, armor scorched from entry heat, voices gentle with children and firm with adults who tried to wander into closed streets. I found Lieutenant Nathan Cole near the Western Relay, sitting on a broken curb with a tablet on one knee and a cup of something steaming in his hand. He looked less like a myth than I expected. More like a man who had missed dinner and was trying not to admit his feet hurt. That made what he had done feel larger, not smaller. Heroes in stories glow. Humans just kept working. I stood beside him for a moment before speaking. Why did Earth come? Nathan looked up at me, and for once he did not answer immediately. Behind him, a Terran drop pod cooled in the avenue, its metal skin ticking softly. Beyond it, civilians moved through blue-lit corridors toward shelters that no longer felt like waiting rooms for the end. We asked 12 governments for help, I said. Stronger governments, closer governments, older government. As they sent delays, legal reviews, and condolences dressed as policy. Earth sent soldiers to a siege line. Why? Nathan held the cup in both hands, thinking about the question like it was more complicated than he wanted it to be. Then he shrugged. You asked for help. That was it. No speech about honor, no claim of destiny, no demand for gratitude. 4 words, plain enough to fit on a ration label, heavy enough to change how I understood his species. You asked for help. I almost laughed then, not because it was funny, but because some part of me could not accept that the answer was so simple. To the old powers, our distress call had been a political calculation. To the Dominion, it had been background noise. To Earth, apparently it had been a doorbell. Counselor Drem approached us, robes dusty, posture smaller than usual, but eyes clearer. Lieutenant Cole, he said, Kieran Colony owes Earth a debt it cannot repay. Nathan stood at once, not stiffly, not proudly, just respectfully. Sir, keep your people safe, rebuild your shield, and maybe name one street something easy for humans to pronounce. We will call it even. Drem stared at him, unsure whether that was a joke. I had learned enough by then to know it was both. In the weeks that followed, recordings of the rescue spread faster than official statements could contain them. The core worlds debated legality. The defense unions debated jurisdiction. The academic councils debated terminology. Cathan citizens did not debate anything. We had seen the sky open. We had seen humans fall through fire and land in our streets with maps, medics, signal beacons, and terrible jokes. Children began drawing drop pods in school. Merchants painted blue beacons on their shop doors. The old weather tower, once abandoned, became a memorial marker for the moment the second wave found us. As for the Dominion, they never returned to Cathan. Their official report described the event as unexpected Terran escalation. Our local history archive uses a better phrase. The day we stopped praying to survive and started looking up. Years later, when new officers asked me what humans are really like, I do not say they are fearless. That would be wrong. I do not say they are gentle. That would be incomplete. I tell them this. When the galaxy calculates survival, humans calculate arrival. When others ask whether help is practical, humans ask where to land. And if you are ever trapped under a failing shield with the enemy counting down your final seconds, do not waste your last breath asking whether Earth heard you. Look at the clouds. They may already be falling.